Hello, welcome. This is Cleveland Opera Theater's Opera 101. We've been doing these sessions since quarantine hit back in March. My name's Megan Thompson. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach, and I am here today to remind you that Opera 101 is for all ages, all experience levels, and it's a chance to learn about one specific aspect of the art form. So we've been in Verdi month for the month of June. So we've been talking about Giuseppe Verdi. And today we're really right at the end of June, but we're going to still be finishing up with some Verdi here. So one of the things that I personally have always been kind of fascinated with is the relationship between opera and William Shakespeare. So William Shakespeare, just as he really revolutionized the English play, he really is, the guy for theater. Like him, hate him, whatever. A lot of his plays, even though a lot of the language is maybe a bit outdated, the themes are still very relevant. So I think he's such a natural fit for opera because the same can be said about many operas, and now specifically about Giuseppe Verdi. So Verdi forever changed Italian opera by infusing some old music formulae with real specific characters and drama. So much the way Shakespeare revolutionized and changed and updated existing theatrical conventions, Verdi did a lot of similar things for the operatic art form. Verdi also just adored Shakespeare. He was very inspired by the Bard. He only completed three operas based on Shakespeare's plays, but there were several others that were in discussion at various times throughout his life. They just never materialized for one reason or another. So he considered setting Hamlet, Cymbeline, Antony and Cleopatra, The Tempest, Romeo and Juliet. Sorry, I'm defaulting to Gounod, but Romeo and Juliet. And so, as you can see, some of these have been set by other composers because they're so fabulous. But Verdi actually stuck to just three. What's I think is really interesting with Verdi is he never actually learned English himself, but he worked so hard on researching Shakespeare, making sure that the text, the actual English version compared well to the Italian translations. He looked at different translations, comparing the older ones, the newer ones. He consulted different translators. He consulted people who had actually watched the plays in England. He wanted to be as true to the original Shakespearean text as possible, and that way it would translate the best to opera without the poetry and the feel of Shakespeare getting lost in translation. So in 1847, he has his first premiere of a Shakespearean opera, Macbeth. So it premiered in Florence. It was wildly received. It was one of his greatest early works, actually. And just, typical Risorgimento connotations. If you're not familiar with the Risorgimento movement, we had an Opera 101 a couple of weeks ago with Stephanie Russo, going through what that exactly means. So definitely check out that episode. But in Macbeth, Verdi took these famous soliloquies and monologues that Shakespeare had written into the play and turned them into these just magnificent arias. Definitely need some big voices to be able to sing these pieces. It was actually extensively revised over the next couple of decades, and so by the time it premiered at Paris, it was really, I guess, revised more for Paris opera. And so in 1865, there was a slightly different version that was performed, and this is the one that we usually still see today on stage. So it's actually the 1865 version of Macbeth that we are all familiar with now. Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene is specifically one of the best examples of Verdi's early dramatic flair on stage. It's just a really great taste of what Verdi's earlier style is. And then there's also a banquet scene at the end of Act 2 that is one of Verdi's most notable ending final scenes. Not to mention, of course, the end of the opera. So this is a fantastic piece to get to know Verdi's earlier style, but also to get to know this Shakespearean work. He took a break from the different Shakespearean works for a while. He had a lot of other work going on. And it wasn't until 1887 that we actually saw the next Shakespearean work come out of Verdi's repertoire. And it was actually, he was very reluctant to write this. Verdi hadn't had any kind of new success after Aida in 1871, and so he retired. He really had to be poked and prodded to come out of retirement to do any more writing. Ricordi, his publisher, just kept pushing and pushing, was like, come on, you've got more great music in you. But Verdi, was definitely one of these on the mindset of, quit while you're ahead. So since Aida was so amazing, he was like, great, I'm out. This is a great one to leave my mark on. So finally, he got poked and prodded into doing Otello. Until Verdi's version, there was actually another version of Otello in the repertoire by Jacques. I don't know why I ever try to say Rossini's first name. I mess it up every single time. But Rossini wrote a great version in 1816 that had been incredibly successful until Verdi's version was premiered. And by the way, this is a perfect moment for me to mention that as we're wrapping up Verdi month on July 1st, or, first-ish, we will be stepping into Rossini month. So July will be Rossini month here at Cleveland Opera Theater, so definitely make sure you are tuning in to learn about Rossini. But going back to Otello with Verdi, one of the things that I should definitely mention, especially given all of our current events right now, Otello, the character of Otello was a Moor, which means that the character was supposed to be of Northwestern African Muslim descent. So definitely a bit darker complexion than most of our European folks. And so there was a tradition of using darker makeup to darken white singers' skin. There's now, obviously, that's kind of controversial. So there's the one camp that says this isn't blackface because it's actually just part of the costume. There's another camp that says it is blackface because if you want somebody to look that dark on stage, you need to hire a darker actor or singer for that role. It was 2015, so only a few years ago, the Metropolitan Opera officially stopped that practice of using the darker makeup. So right, wrong, costuming, not, this has been a huge push to bring more singers of color into leading roles in the operatic canon. And it's definitely been an interesting shift, one that I personally am all for. So if you're interested in blackface in opera, again, a couple weeks ago, Stephanie Russo did a full Opera 101 about the tradition and why it came to be, where it is, what's going on with it now. So go back, watch that episode of Opera 101 for more information. Now, the final opera I'm going to speak about today that Verdi wrote based on Shakespeare is Falstaff. So 1893, we had Falstaff. You may or may not know the character from Shakespeare's operas, or Shakespeare's plays, rather. The character of Falstaff actually first appeared in Shakespeare's Henry IV, both parts 1 and 2, as the aging knight, who was teaching young Prince Hal how to be boisterous and bold and really, take up his space. And Queen Elizabeth I just loved the character. She just thought that he was so fun. And so she suggested to Shakespeare that Falstaff should actually get his own play so he could be the lead on stage. And so this request resulted in Shakespeare's writing The Merry Wives of Windsor. And this is definitely a comedic piece, which, if you start thinking through all of Verdi's repertoire, is kind of a difference from what he is known for. It's not his only comedic opera, but it's the only one we really still see in the repertoire. Falstaff is a true ensemble opera, and its music is really difficult, so it doesn't get performed quite as often. Still definitely up there. But it's not as well known. You tend to be a little more of an opera buff if you know this one. Divas don't tend to be drawn to Falstaff in the same way because you don't have those big arias as often. You don't have a definitive leading role the way you do in, Otello or Macbeth. So it's just not quite the same diva vehicle. Still an amazing piece, still a lot of fun. but just different from a lot of the other pieces that Verdi wrote or even his contemporaries were writing at that time. One thing that, so Verdi had a whole bunch of Shakespearean plays he was considering writing. The one he was really genuinely like in process on writing, there are sketches of his plans for the opera, was King Lear. But unfortunately, Verdi never met a singer that he felt was truly up to the task of playing the character or portraying, singing the character. And so eventually he just gave up on the project because he didn't feel like it was going to be what he really was envisioning. And then finally, I just want to mention that while these operas are still in the repertoire, there are many other operas inspired by Shakespeare in the repertoire. Verdi's operas actually were used to celebrate Shakespeare's 441st birthday by the Collegiate Chorale, this is a project very close to my own heart. This is something that I've wanted to put together, and we just haven't necessarily had the capacity and the time to do it. But what they did was did an evening of excerpts of opera and scenes. So they alternated scenes from the plays with corresponding scenes from Verdi's operas. And so it was none of them incomplete. They did a little bit of all three that we talked about today, but it was a cool evening. So you can read more online, and I believe there's some on YouTube if you go and do a little search. But that's always a fun way to pair some Verdi and some Shakespeare on stage. Thank you so much for joining me for Opera 101. If you have questions, comments, concerns, requests for future sessions, anything at all, go ahead, drop those in the comments. We do try to tailor our Opera 101 topics to what you want to hear about. So let us know. Make sure you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, all of the different channels. We have different content on all of our channels. And then also, we will be shifting Opera 101 over to YouTube next week. So we'll still post a link here on Facebook, but when you want to tune in for Opera 101, it'll actually be hosted through YouTube Live per several of our patrons' requests. So definitely thank you for joining me. Let us know what you want to see and hear. If you haven't already signed up for our mailing list, go to clevelandoperatheater.org to sign up. Make sure you get our next edition, which is going to be mailed out very soon, right in time for July. And you'll also be able to view all of our other upcoming events, including our upcoming concerts in July and August, as well as our operathon. See you soon. Thanks to you so much.